Just real quickly too, at the I've got more slides than I intend to cover. So if this is something that you guys find interesting, be sure to go back and refer to the presentation. I believe that they'll be available to everybody. There might be some things that are less important that are available there. So, okay. This is a photo of our setup here, but we'll show you some other pictures of that as well. So hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics. Aquaponics is a subset of what we call hydroculture, and it's just basically growing plants in a soilless medium, and your nutrients are dissolved in water. So historically, this is their aquaponics. It's not new at all. It's actually quite old. This is rice farming. You can see all those fish in there, and I think this is in Indonesia. So using fish and fish waste to feed your plants is not new, but there have been a lot of developments and advancements lately, and it's become more of a scientific study as well. And this is down in, I believe, in Mexico City in the early 1900s. I think they called them Chinampas, which means floating gardens. And so this, again, they're using the nitrogen, the waste, and fish waste and water and plant decomposition in water to feed their plants. So again, not new, but it's been more popular as a hobby and as a gardening farming technique, and again more science based around it as of late. So we're gonna go over some things to consider before you buy or build. Rules of thumb: I say decide what you want to grow and then build the system for that crop. Not every system is going to be great for every crop. Greens and herbs do well in most things, most systems. Root crops and fruiting crops, you probably want to use what we call Dutch bucket or NFT, nutrient film technique, and we'll go over that a little bit later. So main point is consider what you want to grow first, and build or buy. So we received a grant from the USDA, and we chose to build as much as we could, DIY as much as we could, just so we could advise people on that process. So you can easily spend thousands of dollars on a large system if you want. The systems that we built were we built 2 hydroponic, 2 aquaponic, and each of the aquaponic systems, we ended up spending about $1,000 on each, not including the high tunnel to house that when the weather's bad. The nice thing though is I know exactly where the problems are. I know where the issues are. I know how to fix it. I know how it works. And so, and even if you do intend to go big, I would say start small, figure out the issues. So maybe start with the one that's built or that you build yourself. And then once you decide you've got the system dialed down, you can look at buying something if you really want to scale that. Because it does take some time to build. So just some considerations though. So you kind of have to have a balance. If you really want your plants to do well, if plants are where you want to, if you really want to have a lot of, I guess, enough fertilizer, enough feed to feed your plants, you kind of need to have your fish overcrowded. I've seen people who they have experience in aquariums, and then they have a hard time putting enough fish into their system because they're used to having, fewer fish in their aquarium. So if you have enough fish to really feed a lot of plants, it's going to look overcrowded. If you want to optimize your tank for aquarium conditions, you're going to have fewer plants or they may not thrive. So I've seen that as well. And one piece of advice, I'd say find your customers. If you're doing this as a business, find your customers before you start. Just go find restaurants or whomever and figure out what they want to buy from you, and then start from that. You could have a real big nice system and nobody to buy your fish or your plants. So that's just some advice that I'd consider before jumping into this. If you're doing it as a hobby, then plant and raise what you want. Something else to consider before we really get into this is with aquaponics, again, that's raising fish or aquatic life to feed your plants. In Utah, fishing is a huge deal, right? Sport fishing is a huge deal, and so the Department of Wildlife protects that. They don't want invasive species being brought in. So before you actually buy some fish to put in the system, check these links here and make sure that you're following their guidelines. So just want to make sure, and again, these are very useful, and they're very helpful too. Like there's some contact information there, and Department of Wildlife is very happy to work with you they like that people are interested in this. They just want to make sure that we don't cause problems in the fishing waters. So real quick, this is a list of approved aquatic animals already. And if you want something other than this, so if you can buy it at a pet store or in retail, you can have it. Otherwise, if it's not on this list, you need to go and talk to Department of Wildlife and see if you want it. There's some crustaceans that will do well in these type of systems, but you need to go make sure you have approval for that. One thing, if you look at this, you'll notice is not on here is tilapia. You go look online at aquaponic systems, and everybody says, "Oh, use tilapia. They're hardy. They can handle a lot," but you can't have them in Utah without getting an exception. And from what I've heard, it's not easy to do. So don't plan on using tilapia. They're worried about them being an invasive species. So please don't bring tilapia in unless you've gotten permission from the Department of Wildlife. Right now we use goldfish, but we are about very soon, once they become available, we're going to have bluegill and channel catfish in our systems here. So components of the aquaponic system. So, and I've got a diagram here in a little bit to make it a little easier to see, but you have something you actually grow your plants in, whether it be a rock wool, or a lot of times you'll see clay balls that people like to use. They call them hydrogen. Kind of expensive, but popular. You need something to contain that, a grow bed, right? Whether it be a bucket, a gutter, or PVC. The bacteria and biofilter, very important. We'll focus some time on that here in just a bit. This is probably the most critical piece of an aquaponic system. A solids filter, basically getting rid of fish poop. Plumbing, something to move your water around, and aeration. Plants need oxygen. And then if you may need light, depending on if you plan on doing this year round. And then of course the plants. And here's a graphic of that. So this particular graphic, in the plant area here, that's what the clay pellets kind of look like. And in this particular system, it acts as a biofilter as well. It's popular. I didn't choose to use this type of system here because, well, it's so common online. I wanted to demonstrate something that's less common so people have another resource to see some different systems. But so that biofilter your grow media can double as your biofilter, but again, it's not always the easiest or best for your system. So you got your fish here, right? You feed your fish, that makes fish do their thing, and fish waste. Basically, your biofilter converts that ammonia, and there's another graphic I'll show you here, to nitrogen, which your plants can use and eat. The plants also, that nitrogen in high levels can become toxic, but you have to have a lot of it. Ammonia, your fish waste, is very toxic to your fish. So you need your biofilter to clean that out quickly. Again, biofilter, we'll talk about that a little more, about what that exactly is. But once that water free of those nitrates, it recirculates back into your fish, basically. So it's a little symbiotic relationship where your plants clean out your water and your fish provide fertilizer for your plants. So, so the biofilter, it can be a little confusing because you think of a filter, you usually think of some device of removing something, but really it's your biofilter is surface area. It's easy to think of lava rock, right? It's very porous. It's you need something for your bacteria to grow on which to grow. So there are other materials you can pay a lot of money for, and you can use all kinds of different things. You can get creative with that and look online, you'll see what people do, but it's basically surface area for bacteria to grow. The bacteria exists out there right now, and you're in water and whatnot, but as your fish provide ammonia, the bacteria grow and reproduce, and eventually over time, it builds up to you have enough bacteria to support the fish that you have. If you're into aquariums, you know about this, they call it cycling. But again, it takes some time. If you are just doing it without any additives or whatnot, it can take weeks or months to build up enough bacteria to compensate for that ammonia. A lot of different tactics to this. I tried to do it without buying bacteria, and it really struggled. So what I found to be the easiest way, you can actually buy the bacteria online or at some aquarium stores in the area. It's not, you gotta hunt for it. I'm happy to let people know what I found and where I go for those things. But buying bacteria, you can put fish in immediately and start providing that bacteria for a couple of weeks, supplementing it, and that's a really good way. And for my system, the two systems we have here, I probably paid about $50 worth of bacteria for each of those systems. So it's not real expensive, and it really speeds things up. So again, a biofilter is really just bacteria, and that is going to convert your ammonia into nitrates. So here's a graphic. It's the nitrogen cycle is what it's called in our science books. Feed your fish waste is ammonium. There are actually two different types of bacteria. The first, those nitrosomonas, convert ammonia to nitrites. Ammonia and nitrites are very toxic to fish. So, but once you've got your nitrospira in there as well and converts those nitrites to nitrates, that's what your plants love, and that's what your fish can tolerate at a much higher level. So, and it does, again, if you're just doing it naturally and not adding the bacteria, it can take weeks or months based on the temperature of your water and your climate conditions and pH to have that bacteria build up naturally. Another tactic people use is they'll buy a cheap fish, like a goldfish. They'll buy a bunch of goldfish, put it in the system, and they'll plan on, to maybe 10% of those fish dying. So we chose not to try that. I chose to just add the bacteria. I didn't want to kill fish if I didn't have to. That was just my thoughts on the matter. But if you decide you want to do aquaponics, spend a lot of time understanding the biofilters and understanding how to make this process work, because if you don't get it right, it'll cost you the most money out of all this. Some of those, once you get some other fish, whether you're getting some koi, some ornamental fish, or some game fish, it can be really expensive. If you're not looking to eat your fish or sell them and you just want to have an aquarium, I just recommend goldfish. Very cheap, and they will survive most anything you can throw at them. You will, unlike, if you know much about hydroponics is all about adding chemicals and whatnot, and I shouldn't say chemicals, nutrients to your water. With aquaponics, some of those additives, those nutrients can negatively impact your fish. So you need to be a lot more careful about what you're adding. You are going to have to add iron because your fish aren't going to produce that naturally. And based on depending on the pH of your water, there are different types of iron that you may need to add. But chelated iron, otherwise your plants will yellow. And we had that. I lost about 125 strawberry plants because my iron level, my pH was too high, and they weren't getting the iron. So I had to start that over. You're probably going to need to add some pH up or down, which is just an acid or a base. I like to do nitric acid just because it also provides nitrogen. So, and a reverse osmosis system, here in Kaysville, in the USU Botanical Center here in Kaysville, where our system is, the water, it was a high pH, and it had a fair amount of minerals in it, which makes it harder. Those minerals act as a buffer so that your pH doesn't go too high or low. So I needed to add some cleaner water, some more purified water, in order to be able to control my pH, which made nutrients more available to the plants. So once we dialed that in, I'll show you some pictures of the strawberries we have, but that really, really allowed the strawberries that we're growing here to thrive. Which brings up this. So this is this system here in the middle. This is what we call a nutrient film technique, which is gutters. These literally are just downspouts I purchased from Home Depot, and some hosing and some plumbing and whatnot, and rigged it up. So you can see this tank down here. This was a $300 tank from I think I got a Cal Ranch, right? So readily available Rubbermaid tank. And you can see this hose right here. There's a pump in there, and it pumps basically up into these tanks in the back. This first tank here, this blue tank that you see up on top, that's my biofilter. I've got a bunch of lava rock. I've got some ceramic, very porous cylinders, I guess, in there, and I've also got some a plastic pond filter in there. So 3 different types of media. It's a 55-gallon drum. And then you can kind of see this if you look closely. I'll change the angle here. You can see the PVC this PVC drains. As that fills up, it drains and starts running into this top rail here. And then This top rail drops down into the one on the left, and then on the right and down and so on. So I've got 7 rails there. This particular system is the rails are about 20 feet long total. And we're able to grow about 125 strawberry plants in this system right now. And so then, let's see if I can see let me go back here. You can see on this last gutter, it runs down and drops back into the fish tank. Also, if you look closely back here, right above the fish tank, I've got a solid filter there. So this basically just cleans out my fish waste. I had a different system that I had built and it just wasn't quite as effective. So I spent the money to buy one. This right here is an automatic feeder just to save time. And then you can kind of see some cords dangling in there. Those are actually water heaters. I wanted my fish to grow and speed up their metabolism over the winter. And so I chose to buy some heaters and to keep that water warmer. Oops, let's go back here. And this, I wanted to show you up close. So just how well some of these are doing. I've probably in the last month, I probably pulled 50 pounds of strawberries off this system, and it's about ready to get probably another 25 out of there. So after having my first batch die, I'm pretty happy with the way this system is growing right now. This is a shot of our fish. There's probably about 150 goldfish right now in this particular tank. So just kind of wanted to give you guys a shot of that as well. And so this system here is called nutrient film technique, NFT, and that just refers to the thin layer of water that runs down those gutters. And the second system, sorry, so I'm going back and forth here. This one you can see, these have deeper grow beds. These are 2x12s. This is a foot deep in there of water, and these are extremely heavy. That's one of the challenges with this system. Put that much water in there, it's extremely heavy. So you can see back near the top here, this is a fish tank, and I chose to build this fish tank. And I wasn't great mechanically, I'm not great at building things, but I probably spent about $300 on this fish tank. In order to buy something somewhat equivalent, I was going to have to spend probably $1,200 or $1,300, and that included shipping. It was just expensive to get it. I chose to build it, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out. But that runs down into this first black tank, which is my solids filter. It's just a settling tank for fish waste. That runs down into this blue tank, which is the biofilter. Again, a bunch of rock, lava rock, to allow it to that bacteria to live. And then it drains down into my first bed here. And right now this bed has lettuce planted in it. And that drains down into the second bed. And then drains down to the very bottom here. This is my sump tank, and I've got a pump in there, and that actually pumps it back into this fish tank. We actually have it routed. I've got some, and if you can kind of see these little ball valves here, but I can change it to where I actually reroute that underground to be cooled or warmed geothermally. This time of year, I wanted to warm the water up more than it would be warmed up geothermally. So I actually have some heaters back in that tank just to help, again, build that bacteria up. So one of the reasons I went with these deep beds here is in the future, I do intend to put some livestock or some crustaceans in here in these deep beds. And that's one of the reasons I built them so deep. We're not doing that yet. That might be a little ways away, but eventually we have fish up in here, and we'll have hopefully some crawdads, crawfish, or some sort of crustacean living, or even we thought about some freshwater oysters growing in these. So, and there has been some research to show that the higher, I guess, variety of animals you have. I think there's a professor in University of Arizona did some study with fish and added shrimp, and it really helped out the condition of the plants. It really provided more nutrients for them. So that's some diversification in the crop. The animal crop you're growing can really help your system. So it's a closer look at the fish tank. Again, if you're at all mechanically inclined or interested, you can do this yourself. Again, this tank cost about $300 in a couple months for me to build. Oh, let's go this way. And this is a high tunnel that the grant, I can't remember if I mentioned that, we received a grant from the USDA to do all of this, and it runs out in October. It's a 3-year grant, but this was paid for by them by that grant as well. But this is a 20 by 50 high tunnel where all of this is housed. So is it worth it? If you're considering it as a business, I believe you can make money. just because these ornamental koi, you can, if you get them big enough, they sell for easily $100, $200. But again, I'd say find your customers first. Don't just build it, banking on being able to make a ton of money. Make sure you find your customers first and just decide what to raise and grow from there. Again, as with most horticulture and agriculture, when you start getting to heating and cooling and lighting, that's when your costs come into really most of your costs come. So as far as you can see our high tunnel here, we heat that with propane, and over the winter, I probably spent $750 all winter in heating that. So just so you can get a ballpark in what that cost us. So from here, I'm not going to go over any of the rest of it. Here's some popular types of aquaponic systems, and further down the slides, there are some pictures and some diagrams for each of those. I will say that aquaponics and hydroponics, really the difference is you take your nutrient solution out and put fish in, and you need to add your mechanical filter and your biofilter. And other than those, hydroponic and aquaponic systems are pretty much interchangeable. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions.
There are a few questions. Thank you so much, Taylor, for sharing all of this. Mm-hmm. So I am going to, while we have you answer questions, I forgot to launch Cody's evaluation. So I'm going to launch that, and then I'll launch yours in just a minute. So this is for Cody, everyone. So please give Cody some feedback. So Taylor, as far as the aquaponics, how likely is rice to be successful in this type of system?
I haven't done it, but as you saw in Indonesia, they're doing it on a large scale. So I believe that rice would be a very good candidate for this type of system.
Okay. And then would the food that you're growing be considered organic?
That's a good question. It depends on the additives that you put in there. The stuff that we have here, yes, because we haven't added anything that is not considered organic. It's a lot easier to be organic with aquaponics because it's fish waste and that's natural than it is with hydroponics, because the nutrients you have with hydroponics it's harder to find a good organic solution for that. So yes, it's easier to be organic with aquaponics than it is with hydroponics.
Okay. Can you use UV to control algae growth?
Yes. Algae. Yes, there are filters. I don't do that. We don't do that here. But yeah, you can buy some filters that have UV in line with your plumbing. So as you're recirculating your water, you can have it, killing the algae and disinfecting at that time. So yeah, you'll just have to buy and price out what's right for your system there.
Okay. And this is an interesting question. Does the produce that you are producing in the aquaponic system, does it have the same nutrient levels as produce grown in the soil?
That is a really good question. We haven't sent anything in for analysis yet, and that's actually something that we'll probably do this year. I can only speak to flavor. In one of our systems, and I'm going to refer hydroponics here, I cut corners at one for a little while and just added water instead of nutrients, and the flavor was highly affected. And so, but I can say the flavor that we have with our strawberries right now is fantastic, and the greens that we grow taste really good. So that would just lead me to believe that yes, the nutrient composition is similar, but right now I can't say with certainty because we haven't sent it in for any kind of analysis. That was a good question.
Okay. How much of a challenge would it be to get crayfish in an aquaponic system? I've always understood that those would be tough to get approved from the Division of Wildlife Resources.
So they have the way they work. They make, to get it approved, they approve sellers, and they also approve the species. And so largely, if they have a seller that has a particular species and that seller has been authorized, they'll authorize what they seem to have. And I want to say it's an Australian crawfish. I can't remember what it's called, but there's one that a seller, I believe, down in Alabama or something of that nature provided. And so they've had it approved in the past. So I would just say contact them and see what it would take. But I don't think it would be that big of a challenge. I think you have a much harder time getting tilapia and getting one of those crayfish.
Okay. Would freshwater shrimp be an option?
Yes. And there's actually, again, this U of A had some research where they did raise some freshwater shrimp, and I think that would be a very good option. I'd probably try to do it like in those deep beds that we had. If it were my system, I'd probably try to put some of those freshwater prawns or a shrimp in that system. So yes, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, that is all we have for questions